Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Hey, it's me, Eggburt. E-G-G-B-U-R-T. Check out my website at eggburt.com. Now it's back to those two dudes who told me they would bring in big ratings. They better are their history. Here are Brad and John.
John, it's always good to have that positive reinforcement from your boss, isn't it? I mean, just makes you feel so good to get up in the morning and go to work, right? Hold on a minute.
You're standing on the railroad tracks with a train coming right behind him.
Yeah, you got cut off there for a minute because unfortunately I dropped something on the board and turn you off. I hope you did. What did you say again now?
Just saying, it's just like the old Hank Williams Jr. album cover where he's standing on the railroad tracks and there's a train coming right behind him. I think the album is called No Pressure or Not Under Pressure. Or maybe I'm thinking of David Bowie. But the point is, that's the old Hank album cover, Brad.
Yep, it is. Well, it is. This is the BS show, and you can...
It is the BJ show, Brad. BS was your
show.
former partner, Shelley.
Right. Was her birthday yesterday, by the way.
I didn't know that. I will text her. I'll text her on our commercial break.
Yeah.
What a wonderful human being.
Yeah. And despite all the weird complications in her life, she has a smile on her face almost every day. bjshow.co, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, bs.show. By the way, that website is still up, and you can listen to some of their old shows there. But the current show...
It's bjshow.co, Brad, not bsshow.co.
Didn't I say I was referring to the other one? You know, let's start over again. We're already up to a crappy start. And that's our other station, Crap, KRAP. Okay, it's funny. There was a guy, I shouldn't brag about this, but it was actually sort of funny. There was a guy, do you know who John Stevens is? He's been like a media guy for a long time. He ran a company. You'd get a kick out of this. I believe this is the same John Stevens. He ran a company. I can't remember the name of the company, but back in the day, he was the darling of the public relations industry because and like I got a feeling if you go back into the old invoices of Monsanto when they were paying various people, you'll find his company name in there because he ran this company in St. Louis where he recorded all the TV stations.
Oh, okay. Back when you had media clips. I remember that.
Right, exactly. And he recorded all the TV stations video-wise, and he recorded all the main radio stations, KMOX and things like that, recorded them. And if something was said about a company, like let's say Monsanto in the old days, Monsanto would call him up and say, John, at 8:02 last night on KMOX, there was a guy alleging the fact that we are killing people by the fact that we're using reverse osmosis in our seed bins or some crazy, whatever the stupid thing was. And John would go into his archive. And keep in mind, I think they were doing a lot of this on, like, in the old days, like on VCRs.
VHS.
Yeah, VHS and stuff like that. And on the audio, they were actually recording it like on cassettes or something like that. Anyway, he would go and he would sell you the clip. You know what I'm talking about, right? I mean,
yeah, of course I do.
And back in the day, there were actually companies that you subscribed to that would clip out stories of the paper if you subscribed to their service, and every time your company got mentioned, or some, like let's say might be something not necessarily your company, but let's say it was your competitor's company or it had something to do with your industry, they would send you in the morning, you'd get an envelope, and there'd be clippings from the Post-Dispatch in there about, hey, yesterday in yesterday's Post-Dispatch, it talked about the fact that BASF is doing better than mine. You know what I mean?
And hey, and Brad, you know what? It's a good lead into our top three because back in my day, in the year of our Lord 1997, I worked at the House Committee on Small Business as an intern, and one of my jobs in Washington, D.C. as my internship was to go through papers, yes, newspapers, with a pair of scissors, clip out a newspaper article, position it properly on a copy machine, hit a copy, try to make them double-side, and guess what? If the back of the article was on the back page of what you originally cut out, you were screwed. So it was one of those things, and that was when the internet was coming on board, and I thought there has to be a better way.
And John,
Kansas City Star has a website. There's a thing called PostNet, where the Post-Dispatch posts its stories. That was the genesis, along, of course, with the Drudge Report, of the idea of me doing JohnCombest.com.
Can I tell you a weird story? Did I ever tell you my workings with the original PostNet people?
No, I don't know this at all.
Oh my
And for
God.
folks who don't know, PostNet was the original 1990s version of the Post-Dispatch website.
Yes, and they had their own. Matter of fact, I can tell you where their headquarters were because I got invited down to their headquarters, and they were down in what used to be. Hold on a minute, I got a cough. What's the building right there? It sits just south of the stadium. It's right up against Interstate 55. And
Is it there's the Tums building right there?
No. This is a modern building, and now it's a condo building, but it used to be an office building, and they were on the top floor of that office building.
I don't know what the name of that
I can't
building
remember what. There was a big company that had their name on the side of the building. Anyway, I went down there, and at the time, the PostNet people, who were separate, and keep in mind, the Post was still in their place on Tucker, their big monstrous building on Tucker. They had the entire floor for the PostNet, and they had a bunch of people working there, and they had contacted me about doing some stuff with them. They'd saw some of the stuff that I was doing. Like, once again, I was an early adopter in the internet, put my first website up in 1993, and I was still doing traffic on the internet, traffic, cars and trucks and things like that on the internet. And they contacted me, and they wanted my advice on things. Can you believe that?
That's awesome.
And
That's awesome,
I
Brad.
had a meeting with like 10 people, and I'm going, okay, why don't you guys are the experts. I'm not. You guys got the money behind you. At the time, I think they were probably still owned by Pulitzer back in the day, weren't they? Wouldn't they in the 90s?
They weren't owned by Lee back then.
Right. Okay. Anyway, what John Combest referred to is he's done this for 22 years. Every single day, he puts together a website. He puts sometimes as many as 35 to 40 different articles there. Nothing fancy. There's a link. If it tickles your fancy twice there. Fancy, won't you help me? Da, 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 da.
Was that who sang? That wasn't one of the Judds, was it?
Reba McEntire.
Reba McEntire. Go ahead.
Yeah, great song. Okay. Anyway, John does this every single day, and if you are a politico and or if you're just the kind of person that wants to keep up on what's going on with our government, state, local, mainly state, John has his site right there, and you go to it and you click on the various link, and it'll take you to the story. Could take you to a YouTube video. Could take you to a podcast. Any of that kind of stuff. He's the man with the stuff, and we employ a guy who some people have heard of. What's your name again?
Up a notch to number 2.
I hit the wrong button.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And Casey, what are we going to do?
We're on our way to the number 1. Now on with the countdown. In third place,
The number 3 story today, Brad, comes with a personal appeal to you.
To me?
I must appeal to you personally.
To me?
That the subject of the story we do not attempt to call live on air because they're not in a place really right now to take our call, Brad.
Who's that?
Our friend Bill Eigel had a health incident on Sunday, and he went to the hospital, and he had an object removed from his esophagus. And the surgery, the procedure to clear the blockage, as reported by his campaign, was successful. He was at home on Sunday, or he returned home on Sunday that same day, and he's doing well. He's recovering. He'd like to thank the doctors and nurses. And his campaign manager, Brad, Sophie Shore, had a great quote that I pulled out that I linked to on the website today. Quote, "He will be back to fighting the swamp in no time." End of quote.
Okay, not to be nosy, but when you say an object removed from his esophagus, that begs to the question of what in the world was in his esophagus?
Well, I mean, I take it that he was eating, and perhaps it could have been, it's a Sunday, Brad. I'm not a chicken wing guy. He might have been eating a chicken wing. Maybe he was, maybe he wanted to get in touch with the millennials, and he was eating avocado toast. Don't tell anybody, Brad, but I eat avocado toast every morning. It's the most millennial thing about me, and I'm a Gen X guy.
Okay, so he's doing okay then.
Yeah, he's doing okay. So he's back and recovering, and I mean, I think he was in Jeff City yesterday. I'm not certain, but I mean, his campaign never slowed down.
I have to tell you, and I know we kid about Bill Eigel. I got a lot of respect for Bill. He's a veteran. I mean, he says what's on his mind. There's no doubt about the fact that you know where he stands. You don't get the political doublespeak out of him. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And I'd say in a world of where you listen to Jean-Claude, whatever her name is, Jean-Claude, what's her? KJP.
Jean-Claude Van Damme Pierre.
Karine Jean-Pierre, and you listen to her spin, it's just like, okay. It would be like, I don't know if you knew this, the day after the Super Bowl, she got up there and she said, I want to congratulate the San Francisco 49ers on a great Super Bowl win.
And you know what? Nobody questioned it.
Yeah, nobody questioned her. Okay, moving along.
Their stories coming up. Up a notch to number 2.
There goes the neighborhood, Brad. That's what some people say if a whole bunch of solar panels are being built next to them, right? There is a proposal in the Missouri legislature by a gentleman named Kent Hayden, who represents Mexico, Missouri, not to be confused with Mexico, where all the illegals flood through. But this gentleman, Ken Hayden, would like to limit the amount of solar panels, the amount of solar that is placed on Missouri farmland. So what he's saying, he wants to cap it at 2% to be used for solar energy projects, I should say. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean rooftops. That doesn't mean buildings. That means anything that's been designated as an agriculture area, as a farmland area, based on USDA surveys, no more than 2% of that land could be used for solar panels. Now, if people push back on that and say, is it really a problem? Kent Hayden says that in Callaway County, they're coming right up to about 2%. And if the solar panels that are being developed in Callaway County now actually get put in, then Callaway County would exceed that 2% of farmland being used for solar panels. He says it's used to protect. He says he wants to do this because it will protect the property value for current landowners who don't want anything to do with solar. So that's, as you can expect, he got some pushback. Some urbanites, some urban legislators pushed back on it. Some more suburban and rural legislators also had some penetrating questions about the specifics of the policy, but really interesting to see somebody push back on solar power, Brad.
I thought for sure you were going to the Clarkson Valley thing. You know where Clarkson Valley is? You know, that little suburb?
I do. What's happening there?
Well, this happened years ago. It's very nice houses. They're along, essentially it's a small area of West St. Louis County. I think it's sort of sandwiched between Chesterfield and
they limited
Wildwood.
What you could put on in the houses, right?
Well, a couple put solar panels on their house and they took them to court. I mean, and I think they made them take them off, so because they said that's not approved and we will not approve solar panels in Clarkson Valley. Now, that's interesting about that is that I wonder nowadays with like what you're saying, here's a deal where the farmers, some farmers are not doing well, they're making money by, I would imagine, leasing their property to the solar companies.
That's right.
And this guy essentially saying, nope, we can't have that. I don't know.
Yeah, or up to, in a county, you can't have more than, once you reach your 2% threshold, you're done.
I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is just sort of, don't get me going about that. The whole, the hypocrisy of the energy or the anti-energy movement, the whole crazy thing, we have to have electric, and go to a car dealer right now. Matter of fact, maybe we can talk about this later. There are certain cars, I'll give you one, for example, the Audi e-tron. I don't know if you're familiar with the Audi e-tron. The Audi e-tron, very high-end car, it's all electric, okay? There are now $40,000 to $50,000 discounts on the Audi e-tron because they can't sell them, because the early adopters came in and snapped them up. They were very, very, very hard to get to at first. And now, matter of fact, there's a thing, I watch these goofy guys on the internet. There's a guy by the name of Ed Boley, and he runs a website called VinWiki. He talks about the fact that he's never owned a new car, and there was a special leasing deal they had on Audi e-trons, and he ended up leasing 2 of them, one for him, one for his wife, because the deal was so incredible. And if you know anything about leasing, a lot of times, when you see the car manufacturers push leasing, they're having trouble moving cars, because essentially what happens is the manufacturer essentially floats the loan, so to speak, on the lease, and essentially they can't sell the cars, so essentially they lease them, and they hope that, like, when the leases come up in 2 or 3 years, that the resale value of the cars is going to be good. Then they sell them and they're off their books. So anyway, that's all sorts of crazy crap. Okay, number 1.
The number 1.
Hey, I don't see too well, Brad. Is that Jimmy Hoffa over there? No. No, it's Josh Hawley palling up with the Teamsters. Now, usually in this segment, Brad, we talk about stories, media reports, news stories, radio, TV, whatever, that's from across Missouri or in D.C. But this time, Brad, we're going to highlight something for which there are no articles, and that is there is no media coverage that I have found in the last 12 hours. No, not a single news story about the fact that the Teamsters have come out and embraced Josh Hawley, particularly his proposal to raise tariffs on electric vehicles coming from China. Now, Hawley has been outspoken about this before. Teamsters came out on their social media yesterday. Their Twitter post has 50,000 views. They put out their own press release praising the legislation. Now, to be clear, they're praising the legislation and the concept. They're not saying Josh Hawley is our man forever. But you know, Brad, if the Teamsters came out and endorsed a Democratic proposal, no matter the level of government, if Rufus R. Jones came out and he was running for state representative and he proposed something the Teamsters like, and they put a press release about it, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and St. Louis Public BIPOC Transgender Radio would run a feature about it on St. Louis on the Air. Josh Hawley gets embraced by the Teamsters, and there's a media blackout. If I've missed anything, for folks who listen to this who are very plugged in, if I've missed any news coverage of the Teamsters embracing Josh Hawley, please send it to me, tweet it at me, text it to me if you have my text. If you don't ask for my number. I'm not going to give it to you. But please flag it for me because I'd love to see it.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because I read an article a couple of weeks ago. It talked about how, I can't remember, I'll see if I can find this, about how the Teamsters have invited Donald Trump to one of their events. And they talked about that they had not done this in some time. And once again, for those of you who are not into politics, typically the unions are Democratic and they look at the Republicans as scumbags. I mean, probably put it mildly, right?
That's fair.
And we have, and this is not me saying this. This is by saying, and John can even, comment on this and tell me I'm full of it or not. But there have been lots of experts who said that President Biden, our current president, is the most pro-union president we've ever had in the history of the United States. He talks about, all the time, hey, I'm Lunchbox Joe, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Although, once again, he's never been in the union. He's never strapped on a pair of Red Wings. You know what I'm saying? He's like,
right.
He's like the guy who goes to her for a manicure and he tells you how he does hard labor, right? Okay, that's not the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But to your point, Brad, I mean, it goes to show it's the old Bill Clay Sr. mantra, which is in politics there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests.
Well, even the UAW, which got the big new contract, and what's the guy's name? Sean Fain, or is that his name? He's the new, the very dynamic union president for the UAW that took him out on strike. Even the union members, and I've read several articles about this, even the union members are going like, okay, we got a nice raise, but boy, we don't necessarily like the way this thing's going with the electric cars because electric cars require far less people on the assembly line.
Yeah,
and not only that, a lot of the components are only made in, guess where? China.
That's right.
So especially the batteries, or at least the cells and things like that. So the union workers are going like, okay, this doesn't look good for us down the road.
And the UAW president, Sean Fain, will be at the State of the Union tonight, Brad, by the way. He's going to be one of Biden's guests. Eric Schmidt was on Fox News on the Ingram Angle yesterday. It is the top link on my website today, previewing the State of the Union, by the way. I might have said State of the State. I meant State of the Union. But Sean Fain from UAW is going to be one of the people that if Joe can read his lines and keep his wits about him, he'll have Sean Fain stand up and wave in an attempt to cement UAW support.
Interesting. Okay, next break coming up. Two things to talk about. First off, Bidenomics.com. Do you know this crazy, weird story?
No, I don't,
but
I'll go there right now.
This is a fascinating story. And once again, I will tell you my angle on this, which I find fascinating. Bidenomics.com, and we're going to talk about the city police who, after 3 years, came out with crime statistics. Do you know this crazy, weird story, too?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, they were, and Tony Messenger from the Post-Dispatch was maybe not surprisingly, all over it.
Right, because of the fact that for 3 years they haven't published any, maybe it hasn't been 3, but it's been at least 2 years, they have not published any crime statistics. And what's interesting about that was there was earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, maybe last year, the mayor was touting the fact that crime had gone down, and people were going like, well, how do you know the police haven't came out with any crime statistics in a while? Remember that story where she's touting?
There's no way to kick the tires.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
She was talking about how the numbers have gone down, and yet people going like, okay, how do you know that? Because in fact,
just trust us. It's trust us to have.
It's like
has your car been broken into? Well, see,
right. It's
down.
It's all anecdotal. Yeah. Hey, have you been mugged on Tucker at Clark? No. Well, then crime's gone down. Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?